Okay, so we're going to be talking about first degree AV block. So what's going on? Well, let's talk about normal. So SA fires, electricity gets to the AV node, and it has to work its way through the AV node. And so as electricity travels through the atria, we generated a P wave. As electricity is traveling through that AV node, we're not really generating any wave. And so this is why we're getting this flat line, this PR segment right here. All right. Well, if it takes longer, the longer over time it takes for this electricity to move through this AV node, the longer this PR segment is going to be, right? And if this PR segment is too long, the time from the P wave to the right before the QRS that's called the PR interval will be too long. So if this is longer than 0.20 seconds, that's first degree AV block. But once I get down to this His-Purkinje system, everything's going to work just like it always works. So this is going to be totally normal. All right, and so that's first degree AV block. So what do we see in that first degree AV block? Well, it depends on what the underlying rhythm is, right? So if it's in sinus, it's going to be sinus tech. If it's normal sinus rhythm, it's going to be normal sinus rhythm, except the PR is too long, right? If it's in sinus tachycardia, it'll be sinus tachycardia, except the PR is too long. So unless otherwise specified, we're just going to assume that we're normal sinus rhythm. So P waves upright uniformly 2, PR interval 0.2 seconds and, or longer, and that's going to be constant. QRS, remember, we're not affecting the His-Purkinje system. So your QRS is 0.06, 0.10 seconds, narrow monomorphic. The heart rate is regular, 60 to 100 beats per minute if it's in sinus, normal sinus rhythm, and it's going to be a regular rhythm. And as I said, it's going to look just like normal sinus rhythm, except the PR is too long. All right, so you're going to say, hey, this is normal sinus rhythm with first degree AV block. Or, depending on the situation, it could be sinus bradycardia with first degree AV block. Right, but you get the idea. This is kind of an add-on. This is Mobitz type 1, and so one of the things we've covered first degree AV block, which was really helpful. So remember, when the SA node fires, it sends electricity through the atria, and that's going to generate our P wave. And then as electricity goes through this AV node, it's going to generate this flat line. If it takes a long time, this PR segment is going to be extra long, right? Anyways, just a quick recap there. What does this have to do with Mobitz type 1? Well, what's going to happen is this AV node has a problem. Maybe it's not getting enough blood flow or something like that. But anyways, the message to, hey, fire, at first it goes through pretty quick, right? So no problem whatever. The PR interval is pretty short. But, it got a little tired after that last heartbeat. So it's going to take a little longer for the message to go through. And so this PR segment is going to be a little bit longer next time. Well, now it's really worn out. And so it's going to take even longer for it to get through there. And so that PR segment is going to be really, really, really long. And let's say we stimulate to beat one more time. And so we try to, hey, go through it. Oh, I just give up, right? And so the message doesn't get through. And so what happens is now this gets a lot of rest. So the next time this sends an impulse, it's able to get the message through just fine. And so your PR interval becomes, normal to maybe long, but you get longer, 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 and then drop, right? And you might drop more than one QRS in a row. So that's what's happening right there. So the blockage is going to be in that that AV node right there. So it's going to be above this His-Purkinje branch. So Mobitz type 1, P waves upright uniform lead 2, and as said, that PR interval, longer, longer drop, winky Bach, right? And then it's going to reset, right? Oh, thank goodness, I went on vacation. And so it comes back, it's kind of rested and can start all over again. Anyways, we aren't affecting that His-Purkinje system, so all this is totally normal. 0.06, 0.10 seconds, neuromonomorphic. Now, where it does get thrown off at is, remember, the atria tell the ventricles beat, 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 beat. If electricity isn't going from the atria to the ventricles are going to beat slower than the atria. So if the atria are beating at 60 to 100, and some of those pulses aren't making it down, the ventricles are going to beat less than 60 to 100. Obviously, the more heartbeats you drop, the bigger of an issue that's going to be. All right. Now the atrial rhythm is going to be regular, right? It's just going. Atrial is just going beat, 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 beat. But the ventricle is going beat, 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 beat. Right. So that's going to be irregular. All right. Now one of the things, it's like Mobitz 2. Mobitz 1 is a lot like Mobitz 2, in that sometimes the ventricles respond, sometimes they don't. But the big difference with Mobitz 1, also known as Winky Buck, is you have a warning. Longer drop. Winky Buck. Right? It's that PR interval is getting longer. Alright. With the third degree AV block, the atria and ventricles are just not talking to each other. Right? There is no P wave generating QRS, and hopefully you'll be able to understand and see that clearer in a little bit. Okay, so next thing we got is Mobitz type 2. So remember, this is going to generate the impulse that's going to become our P wave. So here we go, we got our P wave right here. Because of that, we're going over here to get our timer as electricity goes through there. We create our PR interval. And so everything is working beautiful until we get to here. And so sometimes they'll say ding, and now we generate a QRS. Other times say eh, and we're all done, right? And so with Mobitz type 2, everything's going good. PPR is totally normal. PPR is totally normal. PPR is totally normal, right? And we're generating QRS each time. And then PR, we didn't generate a QRS, right? And so PR is totally normal until we don't have a QRS that follows. And just like Mobitz type 1, we might drop more than one QRS in a row. Until, once again, wherever this problem is, just recovers enough to allow electricity to go down here to the ventricles. So Wenckebach was nice. On our EKG, we had a warning as that PR got longer until it dropped. And you actually have a warning in clinical scenarios in real life, right? So your patient's becoming more and more symptomatic, just more and more fatigue as a drop of more and more QRSs. Usually it gets better all by itself, but you get a warning, hey, you're going to go to third degree AV block, where the atria and ventricles are just not talking to each other. With Mobitz type 2, there is no warning. So you might be doing fine. Heart rate is, your ventricular heart rate is 70 beats per minute. You're able to function, and next thing you know, grandma or grandpa couldn't be woken up. And when they check on him, he had a heart rate of, 30 beats per minute or 40 beats per minute, whatever. But you get the idea there. All right, so Mobitz type 2. So P waves upright uniformly 2 PR interval 0.12 to 0.20 seconds in constant until you drop a QRS. And so you might drop more than one QRS in a row. Then you go right back to being totally normal, right? And so that's one of the crazy things right there. All right, so your atrial rate is going to be 60 to 100 beats per minute. And then obviously your ventricular rate has to be slower than that. Why? Because if the electricity from the atria isn't going to the ventricles, you're going to have less QRSs, so you're going to have a slower ventricular rate than the atria. All right, so the atrial rhythm is regular, but the ventricular rhythm is irregular. So overall, this is an irregular rhythm. And as I said, the big difference between Mobitz 1, also known as Wenckebach, and Mobitz 2 is Mobitz 2 doesn't give you a warning. That PR interval is totally normal until all of a sudden you're dropping QRSs. And unfortunately, also in general life, you're totally fine. Next thing you know, we can't wake you up because your heart rate's too slow. So if we see this, we're typically putting in a pacemaker. Okay, why is Mobitz 2 not third degree heart block? Well, in Mobitz 2, the atria is still talking to the ventricles. That PR interval is constant. Whereas third degree AV block, it's all over the place, right? Yes, you're going to have P waves that do not trigger QRS. In Mobitz type 2, just like you would in third degree AV block, but the P waves never generate a QRS in third degree AV block. They might look like they do, but they don't. And I'll show you next slide or so, and hopefully it'll help you understand. Okay, so this is the third degree AV block. And so this used to be a death sentence because, your heart stopped, beating fast enough. We couldn't wake you up and there was nothing we could do. So we're going to draw a line here just to really kind of make it clear that the electricity can't move down here. So let's see what you got right here. So SA node, since electricity down here, everything's going right. Right? The electricity can never make it down into the ventricles. And so this might be beating regular like clockwork. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? But this never makes it down into the ventricles. So that P wave never generates a QRS. Now, today is not a good day to die, right? It never is. So anyways, what's going to happen is, remember how we talked about the SA node will fire at 60 to 100 beats per minute without the brain telling it to beat faster or slower. And the AV node will fire at 40 to 60 beats per minute without the SA node telling it to beat faster. And the Purkinjes will fire at 20 to 40 beats per minute without his Purkinje or the atria telling it to beat faster. Right? The example I like to give is, let's say you're happily married and your wife wants the garbage taken out 60 to 100 times a week, right? You might think, as a man, well, look, the garbage only needs to go out 40 to 60 times a week, right? But, you know what? In order to keep the wife happy, I'll take the garbage out 60 to 100 times a week, right? If the wife goes on vacation, we're going to take the garbage out 40 to 60 times a week. When she comes back, we're going back to 60 to 100 times a week, right? Now, if both the parents go on vacation, and it's just left with the kids, his Purkinje system, just the Purkinje fibers right here, the garbage is going out 20 to 40 times a week. So that's kind of what's going on there. Anyways, so this part says, look, it's not a good day to die. And so what I'm going to do is, it's been 1 to 1.5 seconds since my last time I've been told to have a heartbeat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to generate my own QRS. And so this might be firing at 60 to 100 beats per minute. But this right here will only fire at 40 to 60 beats per minute. Right? And so that's the backup, right? That's kind of like the substitute pacemaker right there. Well, one of the things is you might have a block somewhere else in the heart, right? So, that's if the blockage is right here. Well, what happens if the blockage is lower down? Well, if the blockage is lower down, let's say the blockage is right here, we're not generating a normal P wave, normal QRS. And so it's going to kind of look kind of wide and bizarre. And so one of the things is, once again, that QRS duration is going to be greater than 0.12 seconds, right? It can absolutely look weirdo, and that's the fancy word for that is bizarre. And my heart rate is going to be 20 to 40 beats per minute. And so you can see right here that atria and the ventricles are kind of at two different rates right here. And so this thing is going to look extremely goofy. It's going to look absolutely nothing like a normal EKG. So I will go on the next slide to kind of better show what's going on here. So this is third degree AV block, and so what's going on? The example I love to give to students is imagine that we're in the year 2300. And so we were talking about how back in the day, 2024, that, their EKGs weren't as good as ours. And so they just lumped all the electrical activity of the heart together and they didn't separate it. Today in the year 2300, here's how your EKG looks like. So you got your P waves right there. And so this is going to come every 5 little blocks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here's another P wave. 1 little block up, 2 little blocks over. All right. So once again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. 1 little block up, 2 little blocks over. All right. So 2, 3, 4, 5. Repeat. 1 up, 2 over. All right. 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 up, 2 over. 1. I'm sorry. That's 3, 4, 5. 2 up, 1 over. All right. 3, 4, 5. 2 up, 1 over. All right, and I'm just going to connect these with baseline. So here we go. Between P waves, there's no electrical activity from the atria, and so we got this nice flat line at 0. All right, and I'll actually help you guys out. I'll put down 0 there, just to make it nice and easy for you guys. So 0. All right, so now with your ventricular activity, we're also going to put down a 0 right here, just to make life very easy. So this graph and this are totally different graphs. Okay, so now let's say that my ventricular activity, I'm getting 1 wave instead of every 5 little blocks, I'm getting 1 wave every 8 little blocks. And we'll just offset this a little bit just for the sake of fun. All right, so we'll do 1 little block down. We'll do 4 little blocks above 0. So negative 0.1, positive 0.4. Once again, negative 0.1, going down to 0. And then we'll go 1 little block over. And we're doing our T wave. Our T wave is going to be up to 2, down to 0, and it's going to take 2 little blocks, so 0.08 seconds. And so now we're having to repeat every 8 little boxes. So 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm just going to put a marker right there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Mark right there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Another mark right there. All right, now let me just fill this in right here. All right, so down to 0.10 up to 0.4. All right, down to negative 0.1 and back down to 0. 1 little block over. All right, up to 0.2, down to 0. We keep going over here. All right, down to 0.1, negative 0.1, up to 0.4, down to negative 0.1, up to 0. All right, now we'll go over 1. All right, so this is going to be 0.2, down to 0. All right, once again, we're at our baseline of 0, down to negative 0.1, up to positive 0.4, down to negative 0.1, up to 0, over, up to 0.2, down to 0, and we're going over here. And now we'll just connect the dots. Okay, so in the year 2300, we got this nice, wonderful thing, very easy to see. Hey, look, The atria, totally regular rhythm. The ventricles, totally regular rhythm. And as you can see, the atria are not generating the P wave. The atria are not generating the QRSs. But the atrial rhythm and the ventricular rhythm are different right here. So you can look and you can see the atrial rhythm is regular, ventricular rhythm is regular, but they're not the same. Okay, so let's talk about those SAPs in the year 2024. Oh, that's our year, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change color for clarity. So we'll do purple right here. And so we'll do our first tick mark right here. All right, so right here we don't have any ventricular voltage and we have no atrial voltage. All right, let's go over just 1/2 of a block more. Okay, so right here we're at 0.1 millivolts, and I'll actually go through just label this for you guys. 0.1, and you notice it's going to be the same thing on each of these peaks, right? Because we were nice and boring, we did the same thing over and over again. I could keep going on, but I think you get the idea. Each time we hit a minimal for the P wave, we're going back down to that baseline of 0, right? So 0 electrical activity right here. Okay. So this is going to make our life pretty easy. Let's talk about the ventricle real fast. So we got 0, right, at our baseline. Right, when the heart's not contracting or relaxing, we don't have any voltage right there. That's our baseline. All right, I could keep going on, but I think you got the memo. Okay, now how low are we going? Well, we're going to negative 0.1 millivolts, right? And that's at that level. Once again, this is negative 0.1 millivolts. All right. Now right here, this peak is going to be at 0.4 millivolts. All right. We look at this. We want 1, 2 little boxes above. So that's 0.2 millivolts. And we're just going to keep the same song and dance all the way across. So anyways, going right here. All right. Let's change color real fast. And so right here, 0 plus 0.1 is 0.1. So we went up there, and now we're going to come back down here. How do we know that? Because you look, no electrical activity here, no electrical activity over here. Going back to that purple, right here, as you can see, no electrical activity, no electrical activity. If we go up here, we see our QRS, and right here, there's nothing going on with the atria. And so we're going to solely rely off of what we have going on with the ventricles. All right. And so, it's going to look something like this. And so at this point, you might be tempted to say, see, look, the atria and ventricles are talking to each other. Well, are they? Well, we'll see this in a minute. Right here. And so now we're going to go over a little bit further. And so you look at this segment of the graph, we have no atrial or ventricular activity right here. And so we're just going to do a flat line straight across. 0 plus 0 is 0. So nothing too brain busting about that. All right. So now where are we at in terms of our graph? So we're up to this point right now. All right, so now we'll go one more over, and so we're at 0.1 plus 0.2. Well, what's 1 plus 2? 3, right? And so this right here, the electrical activity is being added to each other. So 1, to 3 little boxes up. So I'm going 3 little boxes up, and now, you go 1 more box over, and once again, it's kind of being added. These are being added to each other. So 0 plus 0 is 0. So we're going down right there. So you can already see one of the things that's happening because we're just adding stuff together. The waves are starting to look kind of goofy. And that's exactly right. All right, so from here to here, there's 0 electrical activity. And so that's exactly right. I'm just going to do a flat line all the way across. And so let me do my flat line all the way across. So nice and boring right here. All right. Now, this is where I have to start looking at things very closely. So one of the things is you see this dip of negative 0.1 millivolts. But you look right here, we got half of a millivolt going the positive. Well, if I made $1 but I lost 50 cents, I got 50 cents to the good. If I made 50 cents but lost $1, I got 50 cents in the hole. And that's exactly right here. So we're going to go down half of a little box. So we've gone down half of a little box right here. Now, we're going to look at the next. We're just going over half of a little box right here. And so what we got is 0.1 plus 0.4. And so 1 plus 4 is 5. All right. And so we're going to add these things together. We're going to add 1 plus 4 to get 5. And so we're going all the way up here to 5. And you notice this thing's symmetric. What we have going on in this side of the graph is the exact same thing that we have going on over here. And so this is going to go all the way down to half of a millivolt right here. And so we're going back down to 0 because, hey, look, they're both at 0 right here. All right. So over here, we have no electrical activity in this part of the graph right here. So we're just doing a flat line straight across. Nice and boring. All right. Over here, all right, it's just the ventricles. We got a T wave. All right. And so that's going up to 0.2 and going down to 0. All right. Right here, we have just the atrial activity in this part of the graph. Right? So there's just atrial, no ventricular activity. So we could just copy this. 0.1 to 0. All right. This section right here, there ain't nothing going on. And so we're going to just do a flat line. All right. Right here, there's no atrial, there's just ventricular activity. And so I'm just going to copy that figure right there. So negative 0.1 to 4, to positive 0.4 to negative 0.1. All right, so right here, this is where it gets a little complicated. And so if we look between these two lines right here, we have just atrial activity. So we're going to copy that. All right, so 0.1. And now here's where it gets a little goofy at. So right here, between these two lines, we have both atrial and ventricular activity. So the atrial activity is down, decreasing. The ventricular activity is increasing right here. All right. And so at the end, we got 0 plus 0.2 is going to be 0.2. Right? And so I got to get up here, and so it's kind of a curve thing, and so it's going to look kind of like this. All right. Now on this part of the graph, there ain't nothing going on but except for what's going on in the ventricles. All right, so I'm going from 0.2 to nothing. And so it's going to go straight down right there. All right, over here, between these two lines, there ain't nothing going on in the atria, nothing's going on in the ventricles. So I'm just going to have a flat line for 2 little boxes. 1, 2. All right, next. All right, so right here, I just have atrial activity. So from 0 to 0.1, I got it right here. Now, here's where we're getting a little complicated at. I'm half a box over, I'm at negative 0.1. I'm a half a box over, we'll say 1/2. So we're going down to 0. Then we look at over here, we've hit 0 in the atria, but on our ventricles, we're hitting 0.4. So right there. Now, you look at this part of the graph, there ain't nothing going on in the atria, but there's plenty going on in the ventricles, right? And so we're just going to copy what's going on with the ventricles. So we're going down to 0.1, and we're going back down to 0. All right, now the atria doesn't have anything going on, but the ventricles do. You know, so right here, here's our baseline, so 0, nothing's going on, a flat line. Now we just copy what's going on in the ventricles, this section right here, because that's the only thing that's happening. All right, and so that's what you got right there. Now, here's where it gets a little complicated at. This is going down, wants to go down towards 0. This is going up to 0.1. And so right here, by the time we get here, we're at 0.1 millivolts. And so kind of have like a curve thing going down. And now this is dropping to 0 and 0. And so you look at this, and this looks all sorts of crazy, right? This is why they say it's an irregular rhythm, because it's going to look very, very irregular. Let's kind of go through and analyze this thing. So here's your P wave. Okay, yeah. Here's a P wave. Here's a P wave. All right, well, where did all my P waves go? Why am I not seeing any P waves, right? It becomes obvious, this is a QRS. You can't hide those. Those are pretty obvious. Here's a QRS. But I'm missing a lot of P waves, ain't I? Well, in a sense, you're not. They're there, you just can't see them. And it's because they're buried. And so what has to happen is you have to kind of work backwards, because we're in the year 2024. And so let's go over here and here from the start of the P waves. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so there's 10 little boxes between P waves at least. So let's count back this way. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Huh. I would expect a P wave here, but this T wave doesn't look like this T wave over here. We're seeing a lot of goofy kind of looking T waves. But yeah, this definitely does, this looks more like a typical T wave right here, than this one, or this one, or this one. So we're not quite sure what's going on there. Let's kind of collect more samples to figure things out. So right here, so 10, so this would be 14, 15, 16, 17. All right, I'm sorry, I can't count, but yeah, that's going to be 20. All right. Anyway, so we got 20 right here. All right, so that'd be off the page right there. But let's see what you got. So we'll put a question mark P right here. We'll put a P question mark. All right, so then let's kind of count that. And so what we got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so, all right, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, this QRS definitely looks different than the, this QRS definitely looks different than the other QRSs right here. So, is that because we have a P wave here, right? And so once again, kind of P question mark right there. All right. So keep going along right here. So what we got is our 5. Let's count 5 more in the other direction here. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. So yeah, that T wave kind of looks a little goofy right here. All right. So is that a P wave? All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh my goodness. Next one came exactly where it's going to come at. That T wave, this T wave over here looks a little goofy. Let's see what you got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is this where you got your P wave at? So so kind of looking at this thing, my P waves, if I kind of look at this, every 5 little boxes, either I'm seeing a P wave or the T wave or QRS gets messed up. And so it sure is funny that I can predict exactly when I'm going to have a messed up T wave or QRS. Matter of fact, I kind of get a good idea as to where the messed up part of the T wave or the QRS is going to be at. But yeah, this is going to be a very irregular rhythm because, as I said, we're kind of lumping the electrical activity from the atria and the ventricles together at the same time. So that's why it looks so crazy on a normal EKG, because we don't have the ability to separate the atrial and the electrical activity from each other. So we just lump it all together and it looks really crazy. Okay, so this third degree AV block. So the P waves that we can see are upright, uniform, and lead 2 unless they're hidden by the QRS or T waves. The PR interval is going to be varies widely. Why? Because they're not talking to each other, right? And so sometimes you got a P and then you got a QRS 0.12 to 0.20 seconds later, but it's going to be totally random. Why? Because once again, they're not showing up. It'd be like me and I'm just gonna make up a name, Susie Shopper. Sometimes me and Susie Shopper show up at Walmart at exactly the same time. Sometimes Susie Shopper shows up when I'm leaving. Sometimes we shop, I shop and she never does show up. Why? Because I'm not calling, hey, Susie Shopper, I'm going to the store. Are you going to be there? No, we're not talking, right? Just totally disconnected there. And that's what's happening with the third degree AV block. The atrium ventricles totally disconnected, not talking whatsoever. Any seeming coordination totally by chance. Anyways, your QRS, it depends where in the ventricles you're generating this heartbeat. If you're using the His-Purkinje system, your QRS is going to be 0.06 to 0.10 seconds neuromonomorphic. Now, here's the one thing. Unless you have the P wave buried in that QRS, then it's going to make it kind of look a little goofy, right? You're going to get some variation there. If it's coming from deeper down in the ventricles, it's going to be kind of a wide, bizarre look, right? So once again, it's going to be equal to or greater than 0.12 seconds, wide and bizarre. Now, if it's coming from the exact same spot in the ventricles every single time, it's going to be monomorphic, right? Once again, unless you have a P wave buried, all right? Now, the rate is going to actually be linked to the appearance of the QRS. So the atria, it has nothing to do with the ventricles, and so The P waves are going to be upright, uniform, right? And so the rate is going to be 60 to 100 beats per minute, right? And it's going to be a regular rhythm. The ventricles, it's going to be 40 to 60 beats per minute if the QRS is narrow. Why? Because you're high up in that His-Purkinje system. You're relying on something that's pretty close to that AV node. If the QRS is wide, then you're going to be looking at more of the 20 to 40 beats per minute. But that's also going to be regular. And so here's the thing. The rhythm looks irregular. Going back to that previous EKG, you're like, man, this thing's like totally irregular, right? But when you actually broke it down and kind of figured everything out, you saw that it was actually really, really regular rhythms, right? But overall, we're going to label this as irregular. So this is going to look like Mobitz 2, but the atrium ventricles are not talking to each other, right? So the P waves are coming at regular intervals unless they're buried in the QRS, right? And the QRSs are coming out at regular intervals, but they're not the same. With Mobitz type 2, the QRSs are not coming at regular intervals because you're dropping QRSs. The other thing is in Mobitz 2, you never ever bury a P wave in a QRS. You will always have more P waves than QRSs. All right, so that's what you got going on there. So let's talk about a heart attack. So what's happening is your heart is dying because it's not getting enough blood flow. It could be because the artery was completely cut off, or it could be because the blood flow was dramatically reduced. So if this is a normal artery and I got like this much blood flow, you know, that's not enough to keep my heart muscle alive. And so it will actively die even though it's still getting blood flow because it's just not enough. Obviously, if I'm less than that, it's going to be even more so. So what exactly is our STEMI? So what's going to happen is you're going to see something that kind of looks like a fireman's hat right here. So right here, here's the bill. Right here's where they got the the symbol. They show hey, look, I'm a firefighter, and then the crest of the hat, and it goes over here. So what's going on right here? This is your ST segment. It's elevated, right? Your ST segment is elevated. Your ST segment is elevated, right? And so that's what you're looking for. Now, the other thing that you're looking for is the number of leads that this is happening in. It's just kind of like, for example, if you're doing a evaluation of Walmart. And so I got one customer. Oh my goodness, that store was terrible. Everybody was standing around doing nothing. All right, and they're the only person that's complaining about this. I'm going to take that with a grain of salt. If this store is really as bad as what she claims, why didn't nobody else notice or complain about this problem? But now if I'm getting 2, 3, 4, 5 customers all complaining about the same thing, yeah, that's definitely an issue. Well, it's the same thing with the heart, right? If I see this in lead 2, but I don't see this in any other lead that's looking at the same part of the heart, I don't think that person's having a heart attack. I'm not sure what's going on with lead 2. I'm definitely going to look a lot closer, maybe reach out, phone a friend, and say, hey, what the heck's going on here? But if the only thing that's going on is lead 2, they're not having a heart attack. All right. So, not all your EKG looks at the same part of the heart. So leads 2-3 AVF is looking at the bottom part of the heart, the inferior wall. So if 2-3 AVF, in this case, has this ST elevation, that is a heart attack. If 1 AVL, V5, V6 look like this, right, 2 more of them look like this, we're going to say that's a heart attack. Even though there's 1, 2, 3, 4 leads, if only 2 of them show that, we're going to say that's a heart attack. All right, septal is V1, V2. That's going to be the wall that separates the right and left ventricles. Once again, if they look like this, heart attack. V3, V4, this is the anterior wall of the left ventricle. If it looks like this, once again, heart attack. V5, V6, that's going to be the lateral wall of the left ventricle, heart attack. The other thing is, and this kind of goes back to understanding, how the EKG is set up. So right here, here's your ventricles, and so we're going to pretend we have an electrode kind of centered here into the heart. So here's the atria. We don't care about these, but I'm drawing them for the sake of illustration, just to keep your orientation. All right, V1, V2. All right, we're looking at the same side of area of the heart. V3, V4. So one of the things is you notice right here, you notice 2 and 3 are pretty much looking at the same heart. So any two precordial leads, so that's the V1 through 6, or you can even wrap around the back of the heart. So that'd be 7, 8, 9, 9R, 8R, 7R. So if you're right next to each other in terms of numbers, you're called consecutive leads, and so that would also count. So if you have ST elevation in V2 and V3, that's a that's a STEMI. If you have ST elevation in 4 and 5, that's also a STEMI. All right, and this is why, as you see, they're right next to each other. All right, anyways, just going on just a little bit more for the sake of completeness. All right, so that's 4, V5, V6, right? And so as you can see, these two are right next to each other. These two are right next to each other, as are these ones, right? We already covered these two under septal. Under anterior. We covered these two over here under septal. And then we cover 5, 6 under lateral. So that's why it's working the way that it is. All right, so atrial pacing. So kind of a quick recap here. So normal, right? That SA node right here fires. And so the electricity is going to go from here down into the ventricles through these internodal pathways, stuff like that. It's also going to go over here. And so that's going to generate my P wave, right? Now the electricity has to go through this AV node. And so that's going to generate this flat line. And now that goes through this His-Purkinje system. That's when it's going to generate the rest of these waves. All right. So what's happening with the atrial pacing is this thing should be firing 1, 2, 3, fire, 1, 2, 3, fire, 1, 2, 3, fire, 1, 2, 3, fire, right? And it should be firing at a rate of 60 to 100 beats per minute. Put another way, this should be firing once every second to, we'll say, roughly once every half of a second, right? And so you get how quick this should be going. Anyways, what happens in a person that needs atrial pacing is it's looking like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Oh, fire, right? Well, that's too long, right? Your heart needs to pump faster than that. And so what we do is we actually go in and heal with steel. We're going to put a pacer in there. So we're going to put something that's going to be kind of a circular device here, and we're going to hook wires up to your heart because your heart's not working very good. And so then what that pacer is going to do is it's going to say, all right, 1, 2, 3, up, you didn't do a heartbeat, zap. 1, 2, 3, you didn't do a heartbeat, zap, right? And so it's going to have a built-in delay. And so if I do not sense that you're telling my heart to beat at a rate of 60 to 100 beats per minute, I say, you know what? Time to step in. Today is not a good day for this person to die. And so I'm going to start zapping that heart. And so it'll go zap, 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 and keep that heart rate normal. Well, how do we know that you got a pacemaker? Well, we could look at your medical history, right? But aside from that, what you're going to see on your EKG is you're going to see a pacer spike. And so you're going to see this vertical line. That's the electricity coming from that pacer spike. So it's a larger amount of electricity. And then you're going to see your P wave. All right, well, I hope that helps. Okay, so remember, atrial pacing, what's the problem? The SA node is not working. It's not generating P waves frequent enough. And so it's ba-bum, 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 deep, ba-bum, 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 right? And so I don't want the deep, so I zap, 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 zap at whatever the predetermined rate is. So how do you know when I'm pacing the atria? Well, I'm going to see my pacer spike in front of my P wave. And so I get this vertical line in front of a P wave, and then the P wave is going to be different than what my normal P wave shape is. But my PR interval 0.12 to 0.20 seconds is going to be constant. Why? I'm zapping the exact same spot of that atria every single time I zap it, right? Now, that PR is going to be different than whatever the normal PR interval is going to be. But anyways, the QRS, right, I'm not affecting anything from the AV node and below. So the QRS is totally normal, 0.06 to 0.10 seconds, narrow, monomorphic. Rate is 60 to 100 beats per minute. So if I'm switching between pace, non-pace, then it's going to be irregular. But if I'm just paced, zap, 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 it's going to be regular. All right, so it's going to look just like normal sinus rhythm, except you got that thin line before my P wave. And my P wave may look a little different than what I'm used to. All right, so this is going to be just like unifocal PACs, right? So what's happening is my heart's beating, ba-bump, 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 deet, okay, time's up, you had your chance, zap, right? And that's what's generating my PAC, is that pacer spike. And so that's what's going on here. All right, so next thing we got is we have ventricular pacing. So what happens is, once again, you got your pacemaker right here. And so we're going to have wires over here. And so, all right, so this thing fires, electricity is moving down here just fine, but electricity doesn't make it into the ventricles. So we're waiting for it. All right, time's up. Where's my QRS? I'm not seeing anything. All right, now I'm going to start things. So I'm going to zap my heart, right? And so you can see my electricity isn't quite moving the way it should move, right? And so this is going to produce something called a left bundle branch block like pattern. Why? Because what's happening is this is contracting first, but the electricity is slower at moving over here. And so that's what you see right there. Now, one of the things they can also do, to make the heart work a little bit nicer. So let's say you got a person that's pretty frail, right? So what we're going to do is, they can't afford this. And so what we're going to do is, we're actually going to zap the heart in two different places right here. And this is called biventricular pacing. And so what's going to happen is, all right, my heart is beating, electricity is trying to move down here. It doesn't, right? There's a block for whatever reason. Now we're going to wait for it. Ding. All right, time's up. All right, we're going to zap. And so now my heart's, the electricity from the pacemaker has gone over this way. I'm zapping the heart over here. The electricity is moving this way. And so you see, it's not going to take as long for the electricity to hit both ventricles right here. Right? And so now the heart is contracting more as one giant unit right now. And so the whole reason for this biventricular pacing is to get rid of this this left bundle branch block like behavior. And so how do you know that you got a pacemaker right here? Because you're going to see a pacer spike. You're going to see this straight line going up here. Why? A lot of voltage, a lot of change in voltage over a very short time. So I'm just going to draw that line once again in white. So a huge voltage change over a very short period of time, right? And then you're going to get a QRS. Now your QRS typically isn't going to look normal. It's going to look kind of a wider, more bizarre thing. If I have biventricular pacing, I'm going to see two pacer spikes right here. So I got my two pacer spikes, and then I got my QRS. So, all right. So what's happening is, yeah, I'm not touching the atria. So everything in the atria is totally fine, right? Now, where it gets a little goofy at is that PR interval. Why? Because I'm asking, how long is it taking from when the atria started to contract to when the ventricle started to contract? So if I'm pacing the ventricle, I'm going to go from the start of the P wave to the start of the pacer spike, right there. Anyways, if you're just focusing on the paced, right, you're going to have a wide QRS that's going to be monomorphic. Why? Because I'm zapping the exact same spot of the heart, right? I might be zapping over here, which isn't normal, but because I did the exact same thing I did last time, all my QRSs are going to look the same. All right. And yeah, it's going to look like a bundle branch block, so it's going to be a wide look. Now, if I'm zapping the heart in two different places, it's more likely to be narrow, less than equal to or less than 0.10 seconds. And my pace rate is going to be 60 to 100 beats per minute, and it's going to be regular. It's going to look just like normal sinus rhythm, except you're going to have a pacer spike in front of the QRS, and it's going to be wide. All right. So the other thing is it's going to look like unifocal frequent PVC, but you got a pacer spike, and on top of that, you have a P wave, right? And so the heart beats, right? We got a P wave. The pacemaker's waiting for the bottom part of the heart to beat. It doesn't see the bottom part of the heart beat, so it makes the bottom part of the heart beat, and that's why you're seeing that pacer spike. Well, guys, I hope this helps you out. Good luck.